Thank you for coming out. I appreciate it. And thank you, Dr. Mueller, for that gracious introduction. You who've had the good fortune of being in her class already know that she's a fabulous teacher and a fabulous poet. And it's a real pleasure to work with students that have worked with her. I want to tell you a little bit about what I do as Poet Laureate. I'm going to compress that a little bit. Some students have heard that already. But I think the notion is so you're Poet Laureate, what do? You know, what's that about? What do you know, buddy? And for me, poetry and being Poet Laureate was finding ways to bring people and poetry together. And the notion that I had was to try to do so in unexpected places, where poetry was not part of the daily fare. And in the process, hope to persuade people that, hey, this thing that they perhaps were mistaught or spoon-fed or hit over the head with when they were in high school and grade school, this thing, poetry, actually is a living, breathing entity. It's a part of what it is to be alive. Whitman said, they asked Whitman, well, you know, what's a poem? He said, it's the expression of what it is to be a person alive at this moment of the 19th century. And just fill in the blank. A poem is an expression of what it's like to be alive in this historical moment, what Gadamer, the philosopher, would call this element of the historic horizon. So I've done a lot of crazy things, frankly, about 190 or so different events. I've read in a factory, Bomag Corporation in Kewanee, Illinois. I read in a whole slew of nursing homes, places that can be depressing, as you know, but those folks appreciate the world coming into them. And that's what, of course, a poem can be the world itself delivered into your lap, into your hands. A lot of grade schools. Gwendolyn Brooks, grade school, I might add, in Oak Park, I believe. Community colleges, colleges and universities. I favored community colleges partly because community colleges are overlooked as a venue. I read, well, I presented a poetry sermon at a church from the pulpit. But when I tell people that, they're kind of impressed, and then I tell them it was a Unitarian church, and people say, that doesn't really count. I've been on WGN during the drive, the Chicago radio station, that you guys know, during the drive time, 5:30 a.m., Spike O'Dell, and I could imagine all the people pushing the presets on their radio wondering, who's this guy reading me a poem at 5:30 a.m.? I have been interviewed by a disc jockey on an FM classic rock station. They cut straight from the Rolling Stones to me, which was a pretty cool moment. And the disc jockey had written a poem for me, which she read, but she'd written it in the shower that morning. It was a little iffy, and I didn't quite know how to respond to it, and my wife, who's in the audience, didn't know how to respond to it either. So I won't mention her name. I have done a lot of what I think are kind of field work, field experiences, and I have found a surprising degree of interest in poetry as an expression of the human moment. I've been surprised by that. And particularly when you teach in a university, one tends to think of one's world as about as wide as the campus. And your peers are your colleagues and a few folks at other universities who do and say and think often like you. And when I've gone off to Mendota, Illinois on an April evening better suited for planting corn and soybeans than listening to poems, I found 300 people in the audience. Momentarily, I thought I was pretty hot stuff. And then I realized I was the guy there who was going to be handing out the poetry prizes for the community-wide poetry competition. Everything from the little kids to the white-haired set. And it was a strange moment for me to realize poems really mattered to these people. As much as hitting the game-winning home run or hitting that game-winning three-pointer in this month of March Madness, this student, this 12-year-old's poem that won the competition garnered as much attention and as much respect from that audience in this small farming community. Elements like that have been real surprises for me. And I think it's been vivifying, perhaps revivifying, in my own experience of what poetry is about and what poetry might be. I think of poetry as having deep personal connections, but also a public function. Poems belong in the marketplace of people, not in beautiful libraries alone. To do that, I've set up, and I think you have bookmarks there. You'll find a couple of websites that I set up, because I realize I can't be everywhere all times. I wish that'd been fun. I'd be a superhero or something, I suspect. And I've set up these websites which basically promote Illinois poetry. One of the things that I've discovered is that you guys, most of you young folks, you guys like my kids, are an audio-visual generation. You may like to read, and you may be pretty good at it, but you like to see and you like to hear. And so one of the things that my kids told me, frankly, was, okay, Dad, I'll go read a poem, but I'd rather hear it performed. And if you hook me by allowing me to hear it performed, then I'll spend more time on the language to see how it was made. Pretty smart kids, mine. And so I did that. And on our website, we have a lot of audio and visual, video poetry. I get a hits count every month, and I have noted that for every text that's viewed in, or every poem that's viewed in text, it has been viewed more times in audio and video. It's amazing to me. So let me give you an idea of what's there. Some great stuff when it comes to videos. Not too far from here at Southern Illinois University of Carbondale, great poet, wonderful poet, Allison Joseph, African-American poet. She grew up in the Bronx, and she wrote a poem about her experience as being a young black woman in the Bronx and going to a bookstore, and going to that bookstore and being followed around by the owner of the bookstore. And we all know why she was followed around the bookstore. Because the owner thought this young black girl is here in my bookstore, probably going to swipe something. That's a pretty compelling notion and a pretty compelling narrative that I've just structured out, scaffolded for you. But if you see and hear Allison present this poem in her own inimitable style, it's a heck of a lot better than what I just did. Go to the website and check out the audio and visual stuff. There's Mark Smith, the founder of the Poetry Slam, standing on a chair and poking somebody in the chest as he reads. A lot of strange kind of visual experiences. In addition to that, I want you to go and look at the youth poetry. Some of these kids, these 5th graders and 3rd graders and whatever, they would illustrate their poems. So they'd write these divine poems, and then they would illustrate them. And we have that online. I'm going to read a couple of those poems, one a little whimsical and one less so for you later on. I sponsor poetry contests for grade, middle, and high school students. I sponsor a poetry contest for emerging writers, poets who've begun to publish but don't yet have a book. And I do that with Secretary of State Jesse White and the State Library and the Center for the Book. I have put together you'll laugh at the technology. The CD used to be cutting edge, right? When this came out in 2007, we were cutting edge. We put together an anthology of anthology of 24 Illinois poets reading from their work. It's called Bread and Steel. It's now available on the website, so if you go to my websites and seek out Bread and Steel, you can hear all 24 poets, because, you know, no one wanted to buy a CD anymore, so we put it all online. You'll hear the work of some of the most astounding writers around, and one of them being Liesl Mueller, the mother of a wonderful National Book Award winner and a Pulitzer Prize winner, Dr. Mueller. I just want to show you this. This is my parents' toaster. My dad, World War II vet, came home, waited 27 months for this toaster. It's a GE toaster. And I called it Bread and Steel because Illinois is this mix of the rural and the agrarian and the industrial and the urban, so bread and steel, right? We took, to get that picture, I think it's about 14 hours. I'm known to exaggerate. That's more than 2 days to get this picture. She was a very difficult toaster to work with. You open the CD up and you pull out the CD and it looks like a piece of bread. Nice, huh? And when you put it away, you put it back into the toaster. Pretty slick. But of course, as I say, that cutting edge technology no longer is cutting edge. So that's the number of kinds of things that I've tried to do is to put poetry in places where people didn't expect it. They could put that thing in the car when they're driving into work, or they could put it on as they're cooking dinner, etc. But go to the website and enjoy those things. It's not the Kevin Stein show. I'm on there a bit, but I am not the focal point. And the focal point is poetry, and Illinois poetry in particular. Let me read you a couple of those youth poems.
I love these poems because